All right, guys, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. If you're someone who is seeking uncommon results, this podcast is for you. Success, happiness, and wisdom. What do these words mean to you? I think we can all agree that we'll probably all have slightly different definitions of each. In these podcasts, I get to dive deeply into conversations with some amazing innovators, influencers, and trendsetters that have had different versions of how they define the terms, yet have come out on the other side with amazing, uncommon results. At some point in their lives, they have decided to unshackle themselves from the norm and go beyond all boundaries. I'm really excited today to introduce Patrick Precourt to come on the podcast today and just share a lot of information. Pat's been an entrepreneur for his whole life and really involved in coaching and fitness and just really helping people understand the impacts of decisions and behaviors that we make. And, prior to this conversation, Pat and I were talking about, living in crisis with COVID and all the things that we have going on today and just where people are at. And I'm just really excited to have Pat on because I just think he can just share a ton of value for the listeners and people out there just with what's going on. So Pat, I want to thank you for coming on. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, honored to be here, John. And I'd love for us to talk about some of the stuff you and I were just talking about off camera, right? So right before I popped on, and I was talking to my wife, like, honey, what do I title this thing? And she's like, well, what are you going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about living and leading in a time of chaos, She goes, well, that's your title. So that's what I kind of want to frame this around. We've been like in this state now of chaos since March, and people are genuinely fatigued, right? They're mentally and emotionally breaking down, and we see it in all it. And this has nothing to do with how strong a person. We didn't expect this to go this long. When you think about it, when COVID kind of jumped out in front of us, it was like, all we got to do is like flatten this curve thing, and we're good. But the key there is that there's an end to the means. Like, all right, I can chill for a while because I see the end, and then that went away. And then, then the next thing, now we're like, well, there's no end. And humans struggle when there's that lack of certainty in our lives, because now we feel like we're out of control. And then that's where this disorder and this confusion starts to set in. Does that kind of make sense, John?
Yeah, it totally does. And just with where we're at. And so, one of the things that, we were talking off camera is just, what do you think some of the biggest challenges are right now with that fatigue, or things that people can do from a mindset perspective of helping change that mindset?
All right, so let's start at the benchmark of chaos, right? Chaos is defined by disorder, right? And this lack of clarity. That is chaos. So effectively, it's out of our control, right? So the bucket of out of control is overwhelming right now. And the easiest way to stress yourself out, to get anxious or get stuck in a space of anxiety, is to focus on things we can't control. And the challenge we're running up against right now is that there used to be things that we could control that we now can't control, but we keep trying to control them. And that's what's creating this chaos. And I did an interview with a former Navy SEAL about a month ago, and I asked him a very impactful question. He's a 30-year career military guy, 26 years in the Navy SEALs, and retired as a veteran, a captain, right? And I asked him very specifically. I said, "How do you prepare for times of chaos?" And the short answer to the long answer was, "You don't. You can't prepare for an event that you can't control." And that's what we keep trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean you do no preparation. Of course, there's certain things you frame out and you guess about and do your best. But ultimately, your preparation is how to thrive in a state of chaos. Now, if we're going to break it down into the simplest terms, right? It goes like this, man. You create a line on a sheet of paper, and on the left-hand side of the sheet of paper, you write down everything in this current environment that you cannot control. Our election's coming up. How much of that can you or I control, John?
Nothing. We can't
How
control.
much time, energy, stress, effort do you think people are dumping into that right now? Emotional currency, dumping into that. Well, guess what? That's on the left-hand side of this list, right? Even down to the weather.
Right.
Can we control the weather? No. Put it on the left-hand side. Not that people worry about the weather, but you get the idea, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that's outside of our control that goes on. On the right-hand side, we write down exactly the things that we can control. And if you and I were going through this exercise together, I'd boil it all down and we'd agree that the stuff on the outside can only create stress and anxiety in our lives, which means it's devaluing us as a human and our ability to perform. So if we choose to play over there, we're creating a self-treason against our mission as a leader, as a husband or a wife, as a mom or a dad. We're committing a treason against those that look up to us and lean on us, because we're playing in a space that's devaluing the decisions we can make. Does that kind of make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And, one of the things that, we were talking a little bit about before we started the podcast was, just how much energy people have, right? And where you want to focus your energy and time and effort. And we only have so much energy throughout the day. And we only have so much, I guess, impact or what we can give each day. And I love your quadrant, your line is, how do we separate the two? Because again, people do waste a lot of time, energy, right, in things that they can't control. And it just totally fatigues them and wears them out. And
yeah, so let's talk about energy for one. I'm glad you brought that up, right? Okay. Let's look at energy. We'll call it emotional currency. That's a good visual, right?
Yeah.
And emotional currency, that's what we use for decision making throughout the day. That's what guides us in our critical thinking. So every morning we wake up, hopefully replenish and revive with a big bucket of emotional currency, right? Every time we make a decision, guess what? We use up some of that currency. The deeper the decision, the more emotionally engaging the decision, the more currency that's spent. There's a time in the day that we run out every single day, man. Have you ever gotten home at the end of the day and you guys, neither you or your wife want to make dinner? Oh, yeah, you guys want to go out to dinner? Sure. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just pick a place.
Right. Right.
And it's not that we're not smart enough to decide. It's that we just don't have it in us. Where our currency is spent. So our ability to make decisions has gotten difficult. And we'd rather let somebody else decide our fate at that moment than to struggle with the decision. That's the impact of our emotional currency. You want to know what spends it at the fastest rate? Stress and anxiety, worry. And you want to know the easiest way to worry about things we can't control.
So what would be one of the things that you talk to your clients about in relation to how to change that mindset, so to speak, right? Because worry, and my wife and I have these conversations because, in my business and things that I do, I can get in a state of just what I call mind reading, creating situations that aren't even out there, right? And to worry about things that aren't even really on the table to worry about, right? And I call that mind reading. Like I'm creating objections or conversations with people that aren't even on the table yet. And the energy and the way that weighs on me. So what would be some of the things that maybe some of the tactics or things that you can have people try to change that focus, right? Because it's not easy, right? But what are maybe some tools or some ideas that you talk to your clients about?
Yeah, so let's appreciate what's going on, and then we'll get to the tool, right?
Okay.
So when you say, well, Pat, I'm creating the environments in my head, well, you know what you're doing in that moment? You're conjuring up this whole thing that's going to happen at some point in the future that never happened yet. It doesn't exist. And as a matter of fact, humans have this construct of time that we created a long time ago that we buy into. We have definitions of the future, but the future is a made-up fantasy land. It's just not real. There is no other time but here and now. Mm-hmm. You're a numbers guy. Can you measure the future? Can you record the future? No. Can you borrow it, spend it, lean against it, do anything about the future? The answer is no. It doesn't exist. You can't even define it outside of a Webster definition of the word future, which again is just made up words. It's semantics. Right. So if we can appreciate, John, that anytime we go and worry about the future time, we're pulling ourselves out of the present. And when we're not present, right, that means we're not experiencing what's going on here. So the rule of thumb here is that the self-check, make sure your head and your feet are in the same place at the same time. That means your mind and your feet are geographically located. See, the past is no different. When we worry about the fretful future or the worrisome past, the painful past, right? The past doesn't exist either. Same thing. You can't repeat it, you can't taste it, smell it, you can't share it, you can't measure it. It's something that's happened. Doesn't exist anymore. So to go back in that time is to take you out of your present moment. Now, when we do so, right, the second we leave this present, that's where worry and anxiety are created. Because, well, again, think about it. If we're worried about something that happened in the past that we can't change, or didn't happen in the future that we can't change, we're back in the space of uncontrollables. When you stay present, worry cannot be present. Think about that one for a second.
That's a powerful statement right there, Pat. That's powerful and impactful, right?
Yeah.
Say that one more time, because I think
when you are in the present, there can be no anxiety present. There can be no stress or worry present, because you're in the here and now. And let me just take this one step deeper, because we have such a connection to words and meaning that sometimes it's hard to let this go, that the future does not exist. You cannot do anything in the future. And if you're still, for listeners who still don't resonate with that, I challenge any one of you to tell me any one thing you ever did in the future. And the answer is you can't, because it's not a real place. It's something we conjured up, which means the only time anything can happen is in the here and now, right in front of us, right? So and I know it's a tough mind construct for people to answer or to deal with, right? But when we get back to being present, guess what? We're back on the controllables. Stress and worry go away, because there's a level of certainty knowing what we can control, not control, sitting right in front of us. So that like putting those together, that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. But it's putting it together, right, makes sense. And then it's like the practice. And I think it's one of those things where, some people are better than others, but I think it's a discipline too. Would you agree to that?
It's a discipline and a retraining. So let me share two things, right? And we'll get back to the idea of habits, which will be part two. Well, let me talk about what happens each time you go into the future or the past. I say you, all of us. I do it too. And I got to catch my ass doing it, Yeah. I get it. So and what I'm sharing is never from a preacher pedestal looking down. I'm side by side with you guys. I'm a living laboratory for these practices, right? But when we go into the future, we fret about something that doesn't happen, right? Or has not happened, but we're worrying about it. It triggers our survival state, our fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system. Now, that is a brilliant system that was designed for survival. Go back in the day or whenever. Let's say today you're jogging on a trail in the woods, right? And a giant grizzly bear jumps out, raw, wants to slice you in half, right? It triggers your sympathetic nervous system, your adrenals dump, you get this big chemical rush, you become superhuman, and you sprint out of there and you're safe. Excellent. Designed to work that way, and that worked out perfect. It's like nitrous in a car. We're just not designed to stay there. Right? Because one of the things that shuts down is our immune system, as well as a lot of other of how our organs work, to put all of those energies into these outer muscles and eyes and ears and nose and smell and mouth, all this stuff, so we can fight off what's in front of us, right? Yep. But we can't stay there. Now, in real life, that grizzly bear never jumped out. You want to know what triggered it? Us worrying about something in the future triggered that exact same response. Problem is, in nature, when we get away from the threat, our parasympathetic nervous system will override, bring us back to homeostasis. Our chemicals balance out. We're back to good. We feel good again. In our real life, there's nothing to bring us back, because our thought created it in the first place.
And then you just kind of keep going down that spiral.
Elevated cycle. And this is where you hear like adrenal fatigue and these things, then it becomes sleeping disorders and all that stuff. This is exactly it in a nutshell. And the soul, for most of it is caused exclusively from our inability to live in the present and deal just with what we have here. Now, on to the actual creating change, right? There are things, admittedly, that trigger me and can trigger this state. Just like there's things that can trigger you and everyone listening, right?
Yep.
There are some people that are triggered by words that can get them into this fight or flight state, right?
Right.
Because they attach a meaning to the thing, something external, right? Now, it's this meaning that we attach to it that triggers this bad emotional response. And let's put in context, right, that a memory that we have of anything bad or anything good is nothing more than our body's emotional response to it. And when our thought triggers a memory, all it does is turn on that same chemical response. And therefore, we feel exactly like we did back then. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So now we're just reliving the same thing over and over again. And our ability to change this starts with awareness, becoming aware of all of these things that trigger these responses in our body and in our mind that bring us to these spaces that are not good to be at. And for me back in my 20s, I was definitely considered an angry driver, right? Road rage, got it covered.
Yeah.
It took quite a while and some really decent pressure from my wife to change that. But you know what it required? And this is a good example of how you create change, right?
Mm-hmm.
It required me to reassociate the meaning with the event. The event is external to me and uncontrollable. And this goes back to what we're talking about, controllables and uncontrollables. Yep. I can't control that. On the right-hand side, the one thing that summarizes everything you put on the right-hand side is that we cannot control uncontrollables, but we can always control how we respond to the uncontrollables. So now I'll go back to this driver that cuts me off getting off at an exit. I used to get all angry and mad and finger out the window, laying on the horn and tailgating and flashing lights and all that kind of stuff, right? Until I reassociated. I can't control him doing that. That's going to happen anytime, any place. But if instead of getting mad and angry and like he did something to me, how about turn it over to a sense of being grateful that he didn't hit me, never saw me, made a mistake, didn't hit me. I'm going to get home tonight safe and sound. I get to hug my wife and kiss my kids. There's no guy luckier than this guy. Bam! Right? Changes everything.
I think you made a really, a couple really impactful statements there. But number one is the outcome of, the driver's going to cut you off. Right, regardless, you can't control that, but you can control how you react. And I think a lot of times throughout our life, right, in my experience and just through some of the coaching that I was talking to you about, is that when things happen to people, right, they take it to a whole nother level to have that whatever was that they can control and ruin their entire day and ruin their entire week, month, whatever. Yet if we can control, because we can only control the way that we respond. True. I mean, there's going to be a negative outcome or a positive outcome to whatever it is. And if to what you've done is take an outcome that you can't control and then redefine it and your brain process it to a positive. And the other comment that you made was grateful, right? I think there's so many people in this world who, especially in the United States, we're pretty spoiled, right? We think that we have problems, but yet you go to Haiti, you go to other places in the world, there's problems. And yet, to your point, like, I'm grateful I get to come home and be with my wife and the kids and the driver didn't hit me. And that change in the mindset is huge, right? And so I think you just, like, to me, just listening to you, those were two really impactful, because words are powerful, right? And meaning, and to be grateful and then not to have the outcome affect and control you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, and it's so easy to talk about it, right? But to what you said, it's a process, it's a journey, it's something that we always have to be cognizant of to do that. And I just listen to you talk. It's awesome, because I think myself, right? I'm talking about myself. I so oftentimes, poor me, or, that sucked, I couldn't control that, and it ruins. And I'm like, wait a minute now. Am I going to really let that affect how I parent, how I interact with my wife, and the rest of the day for all the things I should be grateful for, right? Despite all the things that are going on. So I don't know. I just heard you say those two things, and to me that just kind of resonated with me. So I didn't mean to get you off topic, but
no, that's perfect, John, and that's a great summary of. It's funny because there's so much divide in our country now, and it I don't know how to say it saddens me deeply. It really, really does, because we're made to be tribal. We're made to stick together, not to be divided, right? So I don't want to get into that, but I'll share this thought. I don't see, Republicans and Democrats or black or white or social justice, and I'm seeing that. What I see is two groups of people. One group thinks the world happens to them, and one group sees the world is happening for them. Okay. And the one that sees the world happening to them, unfortunately, they're stuck in a state of victimhood where they feel that it's outside of their control. It all happens to them. And therefore, when they've been wronged, they want to blame someone for it.
Right.
The other side that sees the world happening for them understands that there's no such thing as fate, but everything happens for a very defined reason on hindsight. And it's our job not to see it as good or bad, but to make the best of it and get the lessons out of it that there's to be taught to us. You see the difference there?
Oh, completely.
This group over here that seeks out the lessons from it always ends up in a good place, and we'll move forward and grow and expand from it. This group, and I'm not doing this in a judging way, because many were taught to be a victim, right? They don't even know it, but they're stuck. They can't gravitate up. They can't help themselves anymore until they change that mindset that, no, the world does not happen to you, right? You are a causation to the world up until you choose not to be, right? So it's a difference in, if you're going to go to a football game, there's only a couple places you can be. You can be a spectator in the stands that can cheer, boo, make all this noise, but you can't influence the outcome of the game. You can celebrate your team or boo the opposing team, but you got nothing to do with what's going on. Or you can step down on the field and be a player. Takes a little risk, right? Because now you risk losing, risk getting beat up, risk making a bad call, all that kind of stuff. But you can change things, right? Those people decided, no, I'm going to be a causation and not an effect. It's a different way to roll through this world. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Oh yeah, and it's just, again, it's just being able to recognize that. I think we all fall, and maybe I'm wrong, and Pat, your experience is more than mine, but I think that we all can fall, with that victim mentality. But to be able to recognize that and to say, okay, what things am I going to do differently, or how am I going to view this situation, to better myself and my day, right? Because there's so many things that we just can't control, and I think to what you do and the things that you offer people is just to really reevaluate how to truly live life, right? Because we can have that victim mentality, and when you don't get outside of that, life can really suck. Speaking from somebody who has challenged that with that, like the poor me syndrome or the victim, mentality. And to me, once you can break that barrier to recognize that, I think it's a freeing. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's just something that can just change the whole way you view and go through life, and to be grateful for things.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of certainty, because once you realize that it's not about the event, it's about how we respond to the event or the thing, whatever is this external thing. It has nothing to do with that. It's how we choose to respond to it. And that's why you could have two twins raised in a family, an identical situation, given the exact same tools and resources and training and love, right? And one grow on to magnificent things in life, and the other one be pretty much a loser by anybody's definition, right? Because they fall on opposite sides there, right? So let me just create a little connection for people so we understand like how powerful this stuff is and how powerful we are and how we are not at all prey to what happens around us, right? Would you agree that the way you feel affects the way you think?
I would agree.
Of course. Would you also agree then that the way you think affects your decision making?
I think so, yeah.
And your decision making is responsible for your action taking. And your action taking, therefore, determines your results, the way you experience life, right?
Correct, yeah.
So you've just connected a direct pipeline between the way you feel and the way you experience life, right?
Yeah.
Like, you ever wake up and just be in a bad mood for no good reason at all?
Yeah. And
that's a challenge then, right? So if this is true, right, and there's a million reasons why we feel things, right? If this is true, are we subject to the way we feel? And if you were any other type of mammal, if you're a dog, an elephant, a lion, right, the answer would be you're screwed. The way you feel, you're going to react to. We have an alternative path. And this is, if we took nothing else away from this call, John, this would be it, right? When we feel something that is not in alignment with the way we want to experience life, the results we want to get, we can stop and think about what we're thinking about. Because that thought's going to trigger a thought. The emotion is going to trigger a thought, the way we're feeling, right? And if that thought is not in alignment with our outcome, go back to the road rage. I get all pissed off when somebody cuts me off. The desired outcome is to be sitting home having a glass of wine with my wife and kids. Guess what? What's going through my head is not compliant with getting me home safely. I can tell you that, right? We can stop, think about what we're thinking about, and inject a new thought when this one doesn't serve us, that's compliant with the results we want, that will trigger a new emotion. We already talked about how we can think our way into an emotion, right? Mm-hmm. The thought triggers a new emotion that supports a new thought, and that thought triggers a new emotion to go back and forth that will ultimately affect our decision-making, action-taking results. By design, not by chance. We can choose the outcomes by altering the thoughts and not being subject or reacting to the way we feel. Now, in today's society, it's like a cool thing to just react. Social media is built around reaction, right? About, these baiting headlines and just respond to it or react to it, right? And the difference, I use those two words differently. Reacting is just, that's your dog biting someone when they scare them. Didn't even think about it. Just bit their ass, right? Didn't even think about it because that's how dogs roll, right? If you or I did that, it'd be a little out of place, right? Mm-hmm. But we have the ability, but I say be out of place, but we roll in that mode all the time. Somebody does or says something, bam, we're on them. Somebody called us something, bam, we're on them. We don't even think about it because we let the emotion determine the thought and then the action result. Whereas we can stop, think about it, and we can, instead of reacting, we can respond. Reaction is just exactly that. It's a non-thought out reaction. A response is a calculated process to determine the results you want. New thought, new emotion, new thought, new decision, action, result. And we can apply this to every single uncontrollable there is. What if we're shut down again, completely shut down? What are you going to do? You're going to sit there and wallow and bitch and complain? Because nobody cares. Right. Everybody else is going through it too. What are you going to do? How are you going to respond to that? Or are you just going to react to it, right? There's a reason why there's so much anger out there right now. And it's because we're reacting out of anger because we want to blame someone for all this stuff happening to us. And there's no one to blame.
And you're right. And I think, and that's where it comes down to, are the environments around you or the outside environments around you either going to break you? Right? Or are you going to be able to take advantage, or not advantage, but how are you going to come out of it ahead? Right? And I think because what your point was is that everybody's going through this too. And no one, when someone, you call somebody or you say, hey, how's it going? Everybody's like, good. How are you doing? It's like, well, if I would complain, no one would listen anyway. So because everybody's going through their own shit and their own problems. Right? And so go ahead.
I was going to say, everybody's going through it, but we're not all dealing with it the same way. There's people you call that are in your sphere of influence, John, that you'll call, and the second you hear one word out of the mouth, the tonality itself already brings you down. And say, shit, I wish I didn't call him, right? There's other people you can count on that no matter what, they're going to elevate you. They're dealing with things differently. They're choosing different outcomes, not to be beaten simply because we're not in control of all of these things, I can tell you, this is not going to change. We're in a time, man, we're going to stay dynamic for a long, long time. And we can all thrive in this and be happy in it, right? But it takes a little work. You brought up a keyword a little earlier about being disciplined to change. Oh, yeah. There's a reason. So we own a gym, a fitness center. It's a martial arts center.
So share with the listeners about that, too, because then I was thinking about, I want to kind of go back, but talk about your MMA world and kind of what, some of the side things that you're doing too, because I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah. So I own I call it a lifestyle fitness center that is the heart and culture of our martial arts. So the martial arts being MMA and jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and wrestling, right? And it's blended with lifestyle fitness. You don't come there to work out. You come there because it's a lifestyle. We have an entire culture built around it, right? Our average age is 39 years old, and that has to do with the way our gym is set up. It's not a come in and look how good you look in the gym type place. Like, and we have a code about how not to dress. We do. And we have a code about how when you're in there and somebody's working out, you stay out of the space. You let them do the job. We have a place for socializing over here. It's also a no drama gym. Don't bring your outside shit inside. We don't want it in here.
Yeah.
Right. And that attracts a certain core of people. Right. But most important, it's very results centric. So you come in, John, you may come in, and I'm not saying I'm not saying you're overweight or anything like that, but you may come and say, hey, Pat, I want to lose 30 pounds. I'm like, that's super cool, John. That's awesome, brother. But you don't need me to do that. As a matter of fact, you can go on Google right now, spend about 10 minutes, and you'll figure out everything you need to do. A diet plan, especially for you, a workout plan. You got it all there for free, man. Why would you come pay me? And that's the other part. We're expensive. We started about $150 a month, right? And there's gyms. You have to pass these other gyms to get to my gym that are $10 and $20 a month. I shit you not, okay?
Yeah.
People pay us all day long, right?
Yeah.
So why would they do that? And this is an important takeaway here, right? Because I could tell you what to do, how to do it. You want the results of it. You know it's good for you, and still not do it. This is why the fitness world's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's nothing new in the fitness world ever.
Right.
But people keep buying the same stuff, but they're buying the dream. Right. So what we do different in our gym, and this is where my gym has become a laboratory for what I do in real life. And this is creating the bridge between when you know what you want, you know how to do it, and you just can't do it. That's my expertise in building that bridge to where you want to go. Right. So in the gym, I asked John, brother to brother, me to you, man, why are you really here? Because I really do want to lose 30 pounds. I get it, but why do you want to lose? I want to know the result of the result. Right. Because then I'll joke with you, John. I can cut off your right arm. You're 30 pounds lighter. Are you good? No. Right. And we'll get into it. But ultimately, what we'll get down to is that, again, I'm not saying you obviously, but that that flame between you and your wife is burned out a bit. You're just not feeling it. And you're not really feeling about yourself. And you read, man, if you don't love yourself, you can't expect that kind of love from your wife. And you really want to love yourself again, but you hate the way you look in the mirror. And we go through this big diatribe. All right, great. I get it. Say, you know what, though, John, that in and of itself isn't going to do it, because here's what I know. In order to have something you don't currently have, you've got to do something you don't currently do. And if in order to do something you don't do, you first have to become someone that you're not currently. This isn't about losing 30 pounds. This way we're going to measure you're becoming the man that can do what he has to do to have this body of your dreams. And that's when your mojo will return. And yes, we sell that here. We sell you back your mojo. There you go. 30 pounds is how we measure that progress. So that's why you pay so much to be in our gym, because we get you the result of the result. Now, the important part here too, 30 pounds has no meaning to it. You getting back your soul means something to you. So now I have leverage to get you to do the hard work, to recreate the habits you need to become the person you need to do the work to get the result. You see how that all kind of ties together? You're really getting to the root. We talk about roots of the issue, right? Like, you're not just trying to get some result and sell a dream. You're really digging down to not only the root of the issue, what do they really want, right? And then the mindset and the behavioral changes that it's going to take. Yes. Right. If I don't alter the behavior, alter it in the sense that got to turn the behavior into a habit to where the body knows better than the mind, right? At that point, I got you. We're going to get this result. And I need leverage to do that. So I got to get to the result of the result, what has meaning. And that part makes sense? Oh, totally. And it just makes sense to where you use your gym and your center to even correspond and correlate to like what you're doing on the coaching, because it's all interweavable, right? I mean, it's all connected, so to speak. Yeah, all goes together. All goes together. Mm-hmm. And it's powerful. So, and I should have asked this at the very beginning, right? Because I talked about, you grew up as an entrepreneur. You've been, an entrepreneur your whole life. You've been involved in real estate.
So what kind of, inspired you to do more of the coaching and the things that you're doing now? Not that you're not into the real estate space or things like that, but I just got so excited about getting back to what we were going to talk about today in the living in life of crisis, right? But to really just kind of dig into, your journey, right? Because I think that would be really impactful for people to hear too, because it's, I think that people, I talk a lot about passion, and if people aren't passionate, you can make money doing anything, right? And I think if you're not passionate about certain things, right? And we throughout course and throughout life as entrepreneurs, we go through different directions, but just, your journey and all the things that you've accomplished, it's just really intriguing to me. How did you start to, and why did you start to translate all the things that you learned to sharing with everybody else that you're doing now?
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you asked that question, and yes, I am still involved with real estate. We're out of the residential. We focus on the assisted living space now, right? Which is our kind of our new little space to be, which is awesome, by the way. But so go back into the probably 2005 and 6, we're in the educational space of real estate, which started exclusively in the short sale stuff, and then we migrated together with an HGTV real estate investment company that wanted to bring coaching in. We got involved with that, and it grew into a nationwide coaching company that very big, very fast. And I learned quickly in there that no matter, and our stuff was awesome. Our content was awesome, right? And very few people succeeded with it. And it became a problem with me because I come from sitting in their shoes,
Right.
I am them. And it became a problem with me. And it drove me to figure out why. And I'd be very, very, very disillusional to say, oh, I think I know all the answers why. And I don't even begin to proclaim that. But I do know a number of techniques to get anybody to get anything done. I don't know them all, right. But I know some that are magnificently successful getting people to do things that they want but haven't been able to do, right? So the transition went from, all right, I'm going to get out of the real estate coaching training space and focus on the doing space, on the performance, on the accountability side. And as I migrated further and further through that, accountability is kind of bullshit when you don't have leverage. You need leverage, and leverage comes in different forms, but the deeper emotional connection to the leverage, the more impactful it is. So that brought it over into behavior, right? And nothing mattered until he actually altered behaviors. And so I started rolling all of those pieces together. And it's easy, it's easy, John, to learn something like in the form of information, like you sitting in a class, like when you're going up to college, right? And you're sitting in a class and a professor is just, throwing up on you a whole bunch of information. All right, you learn some information. Doesn't mean you can do squat with it yet, right? And it still has to get converted into an education. And it's not until you take information, apply it in an experience that it becomes an education. No different than if I said, I want to bring you on the jiu-jitsu match. You're like, no, Pat, I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu from YouTube. And you could study the best practitioners, the highest level black belts. You could learn and memorize the moves precisely. And I'll put and spend a year doing it. And I'll put you on the mat and you'll get beat by a 6-week white belt because you still can't apply until you go through the experience, at which point it becomes an education. So that's kind of where the evolution of this went, from understanding why people don't do what they say they're going to do to learning the tools, but then creating the environment where they can actually apply the tools to create the sustained change. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And so what you saw in all your coaching and the things that you were doing, you saw people taking the information, but they just weren't following through, or, there was a disconnect, and you wanted to solve and change that.
Correct.
Right.
And I want to know why, not just for them, for myself, and during this, one part I didn't tell you about MMA, I didn't step into the fighting cage, MMA cage, to the first time until I was 42 years old. Right. And it wasn't by design. 2 years prior to that, I never watched the UFC. I didn't even know what the shit was, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Yeah.
But I got this idea in my mind, like everybody says you can't. So I'm going to do it. Right. And then I used me as a kind of an experiment as to what we can do,
Do you still get in the cage on a daily, on that basis.
I love playing around. So my son now, he was a wrestler in high school and then he got involved with it, and he loves going out and beating me up. So yeah, I do it.
And
Just
how many kids do you guys have, Pat?
3 kids. My son is 23 years old. My daughter, who's a sophomore in college, is on 20. And then my youngest, my baby, not a baby anymore, sophomore in high school, 15 years old.
Okay.
2 girls and a boy.
And are they involved in sports and throughout the business as well?
Yeah, they all do martial arts. My son runs his own business. So he had an interesting discussion, John. He came out, as he was coming out of high school, and he went to an all-boys school that was designed to send him to college. He got invited to go to a school, a really good wrestling school, and we went up, met with the coaches, perfect alignment, right? And he asked me a really, really impactful question. Dad, do I need to go to college? And I had to think about that because this is one of those things. You have kids, right? And
yep.
There's sometimes you got to stop and pause before you answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to listen to what I say, Patrick, right? The answer is you don't have to go to college and get a degree, but you need an education. Mm-hmm. Now, let me preface it by also saying that a college degree will open certain doors for you that you're going to have to bust down on your own if you don't have it. So just be aware, not having a degree is going to put you a little behind the 8 ball in one aspect. Mm-hmm. In this other frame, you have an empty sheet of paper to design your life. Mm-hmm. Choose your path. And he asked me in the context that he had already made the decision. He didn't want to go. So we met with the coach on a Friday. And this Saturday, he told me he didn't want to go to school. He wanted to go out to Breckenridge, Colorado. And he wanted to leave Tuesday. And that Tuesday, he and I drove out, gave him the keys to the Suburban, and I flew home. And he, at that point, was granted the state of adulthood, because he wanted to do it on his own dime. Didn't want mom and dad to support him.
Well, how awesome is that, right? You don't get that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and full circle, come back. It's 3 years later or something. He's back here. He's living back. He's living at home with us right now due to this COVID thing. We started a business here, and this business is his education now. They tell him that all the time. I don't fix his problems for him. I don't save him from failing. I advise him, and I let him make his decisions. And he takes some blows for it, and he's got more work than he can even begin to produce because he does a great job taking care of people. So he picks up on the right principles and gets out. It's good for me to see a child learning through this type of education.
Right. And I think too, it's just not just jumping in and saving them either. You got to allow them to have some failures and experience that on their own, because that's what's going to make them better and stronger.
Yeah, and just so parents don't misunderstand that advice, not all kids are designed to go on their own at 18. My daughter needs structure and embraces college. That's why she's in school. So we have to be thoughtful when we pass on that advice to our kids. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You have to preference that.
Right. No, that's a good thing, right? I mean, you just, again, everybody has their own uniqueness, and as parents, again, we can just help guide them and encourage them and allow them to, I think, make the mistakes and to hopefully learn from that and support them through that,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, awesome, man. Well, hey, is there any way that people can reach out to you and get in contact with you as our listeners, and just, with your coaching and things that they could connect with you? Is there a way that you would want them to reach out to you and connect with you on?
Yeah, so so I have 2 ways, right? The easiest way is Facebook. Facebook is so communicative now. It's so easy to communicate there. Just Patrick Precourt on Facebook. There'll be 3 Patrick Precourts that come up. One's my son, one's my business page, one's my personal page, right? So follow both of those 2. And you can message me any way through there. Or my email is just my name, pat@patrickprecourt.com. Super easy to get hold of. And I am very responsive there,
And then, the other way is you guys can all reach out to me too, and I'll be more than happy to pass on Patrick's, contact information, and, hopefully you guys can reach out to him. And again, Patrick, thanks so much for being on the podcast today and just sharing your insight and, your knowledge, and just, talking about some serious stuff with what's going on, and, the fatigue that people are facing and things that they can try to, do to look at scenarios a little bit differently. I think it was really impactful. at least it had an impact on me. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, and I'll just end with this one closing word. And I say, this is that we do a podcast every Friday, and I say these same words, right? Going through a time of chaos, you've got to be very present, very agile, and very aware. And the easiest way to be all three of those, right, is eyes up, so that you can see what makes no noise. Ears forward, so you can hear what's invisible, and chin down, so if somebody slips in a punch, it doesn't knock you out. You abide by those three things, right? We'll be fine. We'll get through
Eyes
it.
up,
Eyes up, ears forward, chin down. Protect your chin.
It's awesome, man. I appreciate that. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on, and I really enjoyed the conversation, and I know our listeners will too. So again, thanks for your time, and really appreciate it.